first, her school was actually, and I'm going to read some of the teachers, she wrote a diary entry on each of these sections. School is actually located in a safe neighborhood just a few miles from the ocean. Its location and reputation made it desirable, so much so that a lot of the students that live in what they called the hood take 2 or 3 buses just to get to the school every day. Students come in from every corner of the city. Rich kids from the shore next to poor kids from the projects. There's every race, religion, and culture within the confines of the quad. And since the Rodney King riots, racial tension has spilled over into the school. Due to busing and an outbreak of gang activity, Wilson's traditional white upper-class demographics have changed radically. African Americans, Latinos, and Asians now make up the majority of the student body. As a student teacher last year, I was pretty naive. I wanted to see past color and culture, but I was immediately confronted by it when the first bell rang and a student named Sherrod sauntered in, bouncing a basketball. He was a junior, a disciplinary transfer from Wilson's crosstown rival, and his reputation preceded him. Word was that he had threatened his previous English teacher with a gun, which I later found out was only a plastic water gun, but it had all the makings of a dramatic show. In those first few minutes, he made it brutally clear that he hated Wilson, he hated English, and he hated me. His sole purpose was to make his preppy student teacher cry. Little did he know that within a month he'd be the one crying. Sherrod became the butt of a bad joke. A classmate got tired of Sherrod's antics and drew a racial caricature of him with a huge, exaggerated lips. As the drawing made its way around the class, the other students laughed hysterically. When Sherrod saw it, he looked as if he was going to cry. For the first time, his tough facade began to crack. When I got a hold of the picture, I went ballistic. This is the type of propaganda the Nazis used during the Holocaust, I yelled. When a student timidly asked me, what's the Holocaust, I was shocked. I asked, how many of you have heard of the Holocaust? Not a single person raised his hand. Then I asked, how many of you have been shot at? Nearly every hand went up. I immediately decided to throw out my meticulously planned lessons and make tolerance the core of my curriculum. And that becomes then the basis of her students' right. So here's a diary entry. This is diary 47. Dear diary, knowledge comes in strange ways. I've never thought that a person who lived over 10,000 miles away and could impact me. But tonight that changed. Zalata has been with us for 4 days now, and we've really gotten to know her well, and she's just like us. When I met her, we were wearing the same shoes. I couldn't believe she was wearing Doc Martens. When we started to get to know each other, we talked about the same things, about Pearl Jam and how cute Eddie Vedder was. If I hadn't known that she was Zalata Filipovic, the famous teen author from war-torn Bosnia, I would have just assumed that she was a normal 15-year-old girl who liked to shop and hang out with her friends. The best part is that she was a normal 15-year-old girl. When she came, we were invited to Croatian Hall where she would be speaking. We didn't want to go empty-handed, so we gathered medicinal supplies, clothes, and even old toys. All these were going to be sent to Bosnia. This would be our first encounter with people who had been persecuted in Bosnia. We expected nothing less than for them to be accepting and tolerant. I thought they would care less what color, creed, or race any of us were. Unfortunately, some proved me wrong. As Zalata was speaking in front of the people from Croatia, they were all nodding their heads. Yes, yes, they would say. She spoke about all the injustices that one must go through for a simple label or belief. She mentioned her experience as a 14-year-old growing up in war-torn Bosnia, how hard it was for her to lose friends because of the way they looked or what they believed in. At this point, we were the ones nodding our heads. There's one thing that really stands out in my mind from that night, however. As she was answering questions, a couple of adults asked her what ethnicity she was. Croatian? Muslim? Serbian? I was upset that instead of getting the message that she was trying to convey, they were too preoccupied with what nationality she was. Were these the same adults that preached how wrong racism and discrimination are? Were these the same people that a minute ago agreed that we shouldn't care about labels? Zalata looked around, stared at us, and simply said, I'm a human being. That's exactly what we all are. We spend so much time trying to figure out what race a person is when we should just get to know them as individuals. I felt like answering their question with a question. Does it matter? Will it make a difference if she was Croatian, Muslim, Serbian? She taught me the most valuable lesson that anybody could ever have, and to think that she was only 15. Ever since that day, I tried not to accept society's labels, but to fight against them. I've always been taught to be proud of being Latina, proud of being Mexican, and I was. I was probably more proud of being a label than of being a human being. That's the way most of us were taught. Since the day we entered the world, we were a label, a number, a statistic. That's just the way it is. Now, if you ask me what race I am, like Salada, I'll simply say I'm a human being. Lots of different entries. This is one of those that there were probably a half a dozen entries in this whole book that raised the ire of the, what do they call it, Livingston Organization for Values, Education, or whatever it was, the Love Group. And when we say Hull, by the way, looked at this, it was a small group of people in Hull that raised the issue and pursued it. So here's one. Dear Diary, quote, as his penis twirled in my mouth, thoughts of the popcorn he promised me ran through my mind, end quote. As I read these words, I began to wonder who the author of this story was. My mind began to think, damn, I've been through the same thing. Bad things always happen to the wrong people. I read the sentence repeatedly, then scanned the room to see any body language that would reveal who wrote it. I looked, yet no one gave me any evidence who the author was. I can't believe that I got a story to read and edit that I could have told. I stared down at the words and began to think back on the terrible act of violence I suffered at the hands of a family member. I felt a sense of relief that someone else had been molested. Someone else had a story to tell also. I was supposed to edit the story, but after reading it over and over, I felt the words needed to remain the way they were, untouched. The words held power. Then it hit me like a ton of bricks. Did someone know I had been molested? Maybe Mrs. G knew, or maybe the others. Oh shit, what if they all knew? Why does it seem that everyone is looking at me? Damn, after all this time, has my little secret been discovered? Then Mrs. G decided to read the story aloud so everyone would know the degree of individuality put into our stories. She told us this was our chance to speak up on the tragic things that had happened to us in our lives. Some girls left the room, too overwhelmed with emotions to stay and hear the rest. Some stayed in the room and cried. But not me, however. I remained cool as a cucumber. A muscle didn't even move. I hardly even breathed or blinked. I just sat still and asked myself, why in the hell did we have to do this damn editing anyway? The more I stared at the words, the more I began to realize I had been blessed through someone else's misfortune. Maybe someone will feel the same way after learning about my experience. I wanted to reach out to her to let her know she wasn't alone. I wanted to tell her I know how she feels, to show sympathy, to be a true friend to her. I never found her, but now I know that I am not alone, and that has made a difference. I feel as though chaos is stalking me, sliding its slimy tentacles into every crevice of my life. It has already conquered my home life. Now it's trying to destroy the freedom riders too. Every time I begin to get comfortable, someone goes and changes the rules on me. The whole reason I came to Wilson in the first place was to escape the uncontrollable environment I was raised in, if raising is what you call it. My mother's parenting capabilities consisted of, quote, I'll give you $20 and the keys to my car if you leave me alone this weekend, unquote. It wasn't that she was a bad mother. She was just tired of playing the role of mother, as she so bluntly told me one morning. How could she teach me to be responsible? She wasn't responsible herself. Maybe it was her drinking. Maybe it was her drugs. Maybe it was me. All I know is that absolute and complete freedom gets old very fast. My mother was simply tired of raising me, so I raised her. There would be times when I wouldn't see my mom for days, even weeks. Sure, I always knew where she was, but that is never the same thing as having a real parent there. I missed the little things. Curfews and rules were non-existent. Whenever I asked her when I had to be home, she would reply by Monday, even if it was Friday. Imagine being 15 years old and feeling as though your own mother could care less about you. I not only wanted, but needed guidance. After a while, I would give myself curfews so that people wouldn't know my mother was oblivious. It's hard raising yourself. If it was easy, then we wouldn't have parents. But we do, or most people do at least. I began to feel so alone. All my life, it has been my mom and me, and now it was just me. I became very depressed, escaping reality any way I could. The Freedom Riders filled this huge hole. The Freedom Riders filled this huge hole I had by giving me a safe place where I always knew someone cared. We are in jeopardy of not being able to be a class next year. Losing these people would be like losing my family. I can't go through that again. The 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 bulk of the entries in this book, in this diary, are reflective of students' own coming to understand their life and that they can do things in their life and control their life and make something of themselves. And that was part of the message that they learned from Anne Frank and Fitzalata and so many others, and that which you can't change, find other ways to help yourself. These kids ended up virtually all going out of high school to college. Most of them were first-time high school graduates, that is, first of their families to graduate high school, and thus most of them were also the first ones to go to college. Learning from others.